Further debate. Senator Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Debate against the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, Senators, I believe that so far everyone that has stood has indicated that they don't like the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. I stand in opposition to Senate Bill 1042. Supporters of 1042 have indicated that they want to resist Obamacare. So do I. Mr. President, on the first page of the bill, Section 41.6.102, Purpose and Intent, it talks about that resistance. In my opinion, what that says is we're going to resist by complying. Or, in other words, we're going to resist by doing what they're telling us to do. I would suggest a different path. I oppose the exchange because it is the implementation of this. I know many of you have seen this before, but that's really what we're talking about here. This is the Affordable Care Act. And there are ramifications for voluntarily complying with this bill and taking the money to voluntarily comply. In my opinion, this is going to be litigated for decades. Once we comply, once we take their money, we're in a poor position to litigate. The state of Oklahoma, as many of you know, has filed a lawsuit. They contend, these are my words, but I believe this is the correct meaning, they contend that they think it's the federal government can only enforce some of these penalties if the state has consented to a state-based exchange. If that's true, that's a very big deal. And that's a very strong argument against Senate Bill 1042. We don't know that yet, but it's out there. Another reason that I oppose the exchange is the data collection mandates. We haven't talked about that much. But there's at least 6 mandates in this bill that will require personal data information of each of us and our citizens that will roll into a federal database somewhere. Now, not that I am too cynical, but I can't imagine too many positive uses for the government to have all that information. I know there might be some, not going to argue that, but there's also room for, let's say, shenanigans. I don't want those data collections forced on me, on you, or on the people we represent. We had a close primary not long ago, and a lot of people were upset about that. Wait till they get a load of this. Then there's also the issue of if we involuntarily engage, that puts us in the position of being the enforcement arm. We've pretty much said so far we don't like this, and frankly, I don't want to put the state in the position of having to enforce a law we don't like. Lastly, and many of you, or many of the debaters thus far, has brought up the fact that we really don't know all the costs. Some of the rules haven't even been written yet. That's problematic. And I can't recall us moving on legislation without knowing that information. Maybe we have. I can't think of it. It's been argued, Mr. President, against senators that if we don't do this, we really don't have an option. If we don't do this, that the federal exchange is imminent. Maybe. I would submit maybe not. I'm not yet bought into the fact that it's an absolute done deal. And yes, there are 25, I just heard possibly 26 states who are saying no. And the good senator from 27 mentioned, and perhaps rightfully so, for different reasons. The point is, they're saying no. And for whatever that reason, that's not simple for the federal government to do that, to move in and put those exchanges in place 25, 26, however many times. There is a fiscal cost. There is a resource cost. There is political capital spent. And quite frankly, they have got other problems way beyond what we're dealing with here. Yes, I would like to give them a chance to fail. Mr. President, good senators, I would also put up another argument that many of you may not agree with, but I think it's worth talking about. It is possible a federal exchange is better. What if Oklahoma's right? What if that lawsuit prevails? If that's the case, then the enforcement on our businesses would not be mandatory for the penalties. It's possible. And I'll go back to the enforcement discussion again. If the federal government owns it, that means they have to enforce it. And I'm extra sensitive to that point because I disagree with the premise of the Affordable Care Act so much. I'm very sensitive to being responsible for enforcing it. If I did support an exchange, which I don't, but if I did, I still would not support this bill. We're giving up legislative oversight here. And we're giving up that oversight to some quasi-governmental board. In all other areas, we have a rule review process. Under this plan, that rule review goes away. We forfeit that. There's no cap on the fees. We've been told that it's going to be cheaper. Well, it might be. But according to this legislation, it doesn't assure us of that. There's also mention about the life issue. Under Senate Bill 1042, as it's written right now, qualifying plans would mandate the dispensation of abortifacients. That's a whole other discussion that we really haven't gotten into, but that's the reality of the bill that stands before us. We've got to ask ourselves at some point, just how much are we willing to give up? It's one thing to surrender our oversight. It's another when you start to get into the value and religious discussions. Mr. President, good senators, I'm not going to ramble on, but I fear that we're about to pass a bill with known major flaws. If there weren't some of those known major flaws, there wouldn't be a House Bill 179. And I'm not going to debate that or refer to that, but that is a bill that the House has tied to this bill, so it's pertinent. Why has that come up already? This is a bill with known major flaws. I fear that we're going to pass this bill and we're going to rationalize doing so by convincing ourselves that something worse is going to happen if we don't. If we do pass this bill, I can tell you this, we are 100% guaranteed to become a subcontractor for the federal government because we're going to voluntarily comply to do that. If we don't, there is at least a chance. I don't know how big that chance is. I'm not going to hang a lot on that argument, but there's at least a chance that doesn't happen. And we can learn by observing what takes place in other states. My point with that is there is not a big rush on this. We are prudent to hold. Some will say yes, but there's the federal money out there, and that federal money is only going to be offered for a limited amount of time. Well, first of all, that's what they want. They want us to take the money. They want us to be on the hook for that, for some of the, I believe, some of the legal reasons that I mentioned earlier. But I would just remind, Mr. President, good senators, that's temporary. And I even question that, $30 million or $20 to $30 million for a website? That's an amazing website. And I would say one other thing, that, of course, that 20 or 30 million is, that should give us another hint. There's more to it than that, Mr. President, good senators. There's the bureaucracy that comes with the administration. And by the way, once it's there, it's not going away. The so-called companion bill coming is not a fix. Again, I'm not going to debate that, but I've seen it. I don't believe that is our answer. Plus, that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing the merits of Senate Bill 1042 on its own. You know, I just have to explain something personally here. I've been probably more visible on this issue than I'm really comfortable with. For those of you who know me, this is my 9th year in the Senate, and I think I just submitted my first guest opinion in 9 years. And I've kind of been out on front in kind of an uncomfortable way on this. And I've been asked, Fulcher, why are you so rabid on this issue? Why are you taking such a vocal stance on it? In my heart and my mind, I know where this leads. And I know that there's no turning back once we do it. Think Medicare, think Medicaid, Social Security. Folks, we pull the trigger, there's no turning back. I do believe this puts us on an imminent path to a single-payer federal health care system, and I do believe that it puts our private insurance industry at risk, where over time they're either crippled or gone. And it's interesting because I've taken criticism from those entities, but I just give you my word. My intent and my strong belief is I'm attempting to be their best friend. I'm going to close things up with a personal story that may also share why I'm so sensitive to this particular bill, because I've lived one segment of my life that directly reflects my position on it. And this was several years ago, so I don't have all the facts directly right, but the story is pertinent, and hopefully it will share that insight. It was about 1997. The company that I worked for purchased an electronics manufacturing company in Belgium. And I was part of that transaction. And it was a profitable operation. And the equipment was, for the most part, current. The employee base was educated and productive. Mr. President, good senators, we bought that plant for $1 US. $1 US. And I don't recall the exact amount of the assets, but it was somewhere around $500 million. The operator of that facility, it's my recollection at the time, only had one exit strategy, and that was to walk away because of the social costs that had incurred, and the mandates, the government mandates and the government mandated social costs were so heavy. Rather than continue to operate, they walked away. They did have the option of laying everybody off, which is the only reason we were interested in buying it, because we didn't have to take that obligation. And we did. And as I recall, we hired a fraction of the people back. But it was nothing what it was. I'm fearful that that's where we're going here. Mr. President, good senators, I'm one little state senator in one little state. But I'm trying to do anything I can to minimize the strings of the federal government being attached to me and my family. And I know they're already there. They're already on my car and my house and my job. But I'd really prefer to minimize the ones that get attached to my body. And with health care, that's what they're talking about. So with that, I stand with my political party. I stand with other strong supporters of the Farm Bureau, Tea Party advocates, pro-life groups, and many others by saying we really don't have a rush here. Let's learn. Let's understand the costs. Let's understand the rules. We really don't have much to gain by moving now, but we've got a lot to lose. Mr. President, good senators, I will vote no.